This is
The
Bhangra Podcast. What's up, y'all, and welcome to another episode of the Bhangra Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking to the judges from Bhangra Blowout 2022. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you might notice that this is the first time we're doing a video podcast. This is something we've wanted to do for a really long time just because Bhangra and dance is such a visual format, and listening to somebody else talk about dance is kind of weird and a little bit hard to understand. So I'm really excited today so that we can, take the video and performances from Blowout, overlay that on top of what the judges are actually talking about so you can directly see what the judges are talking about. And hopefully that just helps you understand the judges' thought process during deliberations and everything else. So we're trying out the YouTube format. Let me know if you liked it in the comments below. Subscribe to the podcast, share this with a friend. Just generally give us some feedback. I really do hope y'all like it. I spent a lot of time on this, and hopefully in the future I can get somebody else to edit this, because I can edit audio, video, not so much. But anyways, enough of me rambling. Really excited for y'all to see this conversation in full.
All right, welcome back to this week's episode of the Bhangra Podcast. For this week, we have our rendition of the Bachelorette Men Tell All episode, the judges' review of Bhangra Blowout. Before we get into this podcast, be sure to go ahead and hit our show notes where you can go ahead and pick the rubric, go onto our YouTube channel at the same time, and watch all the performances and judge it yourself. Then come back to this podcast and see if your thoughts line up with our judges. Without further ado, let's get into this with introductions. We're going to act as if this is one of those group me's with your teams and your liaisons where they ask you to popcorn it around and it becomes cheesy stuff. I'll start with Pooja, who is to somebody's left over here. Pooja, go ahead and introduce yourself and then call out somebody else.
Hey everybody, this is Pooja from NEBC and Forge in Boston. Popcorn just me.
Hey guys, my name is just Smeet. I'm from DCMPA and DCMPA only. Popcorn to Avi.
Hello, I'm Avi Jaggi. You might remember me from the ECS episode. I'm from VSB, but also Virginia. Popcorn to Akshay.
Hey guys, I'm Akshaya. I was on the Michigan Bhangra team, and yeah, that's my primary team.
Hi, my name is Umer. I was captain of first class Bhangra, and now mainly just run this podcast for the most part.
And yeah, I can just hop right off of that. And can you guys just, like you said, the rubric is very old and you guys went ahead and made some organizational changes. Can you guys break down what this rubric is? I know this is a huge hot topic within the circuit at the moment. Everybody's complaining about placings no matter where they are, but they don't take time to understand the rubric.
I can start. So I guess I'll just go into how it ended up based on how we kind of reorganized it. So set design was 40 points total. Execution was 45 points total, and then impact was 30 points total. So at face value, it does kind of look like execution is valued more than set design, but I think that it's also important to note that the impact section is, I think, like the core of what Blowout is. I think a lot of these teams, they've been competing all year. Blowout is kind of treated as a championship for all of them. So I think that even though execution is weighted just like 5 points more, the impact section is like really what ultimately made the difference in placings for all of us. And I think that historically Blowout has been pretty equal in between like creativity and execution. So I think that we tried to stay true to that. Any other like additions that we have are really minor, like random deductions for like vulgarity and mix, like that sort of thing. But beyond that, I think that it was just more of a reorganization.
All right, so to kind of go off of that, for like teams in the future who are looking to apply to Blowout, if they use the same rubric again, would you say that this is looking more towards just dancing as a whole rather than between pushing the boundaries and dancing?
I'd say it's a bit of a balance. I think the fact that
Balance? All right.
normally when you look at this rubric, it's technically like a 40-45, like in terms of like creativity and set execution. That being said, like open and close is 10 points, wow factor overall impression is 10 points, and that's like 20 points, for like quote unquote impact, and then 5 points for mix, 5 points for the other, but like who cares? You're not going to win because you had your vests were shinier or not. So the open close and the overall impression, I think generally you're gonna get that because of your ideas. Now, the way you execute your ideas, how well you execute your ideas, and how that gets communicated, that absolutely amplifies your overall impression, the opening, your closing, everything like that. But if you come in with a very straight, clean set, that's not going to get you wind blowout. You need to be clean, you need to be good. But then on top of that, you need to pack a punch with your ideas.
All right, now moving on to what everybody's gonna tune in for this podcast for. Let's break down the placings. Do you guys want to take us through who got third?
So I think I'll go ahead here. I think we all pretty much, no, not all actually. Well, so for the placings were VT, UVA, and Cornell, and I think the easiest one had to be VT, right? They set the standard pretty hard for the start of the show, and there's always this common misconception about teams when they go what lineup they are in the show, right? They always like to think that, oh, going last is probably the best, but I disagree. I think that going first, in a sense, is actually beneficial to the team because, I don't know if you guys can relate, but me as a judge, when I'm judging these teams, I'm looking at comparisons to previous teams. But when I'm with VT, I just started handing out points like Prashad, it was just constantly going. I wasn't basing them off anybody, whereas teams like UMD, I was like, were they better than UNC in choreography? No. Okay, so -2 there, right? And then you start, as you go, you kind of become more and more strict, whereas, VT kind of had it pretty good because they were first in the show. And we've seen it before. We've seen it teams like my team, DCMPA, we've gone first twice in a row and gotten first place at competitions like ECS. But, I think VT really, really stepped their game up in terms of their set too, in general, because I remember the first time I saw their set was at BKB in February, and let me tell you, it was absolute horseshit. But they really stepped their game up.
But I think that immediately after they finished their performance, all of us kind of looked at each other, we're like, shit, because as a judge, you want to kind of benchmark your first performance not too high because you have 7 other ones right after that. And I think it was a genuine concern where we want to give them all these points, but we really had to be careful. But no, they really set the tone for the show.
Second place was a big I want to say no, it wasn't. It was a tiny deliberation, right? Because I think Avi had a UVA for first place, right? And I'm not gonna lie to you. Looking back after this competition, I've watched the UVA video 4 times the day after, especially the Bhangra podcast video 1 that you guys posted. They really were really close to first place. If you look at my rubric, they were 1 point behind Virginia Tech. And honestly, the whole thing about the stage backdrop, do we want to talk about that? Because that was a 3-point deduction, right? And if UVA didn't have that 3-point deduction, they easily would have had a lot more points than VT from my end. But, I think UVA was really close to getting first place. And, Avi, I kind of agree with you in a sense that they should have gotten first place, but whatever said is done now. But yeah. So
yeah, let me chime in a little bit from my perspective, since I always tend to be the guy that disagrees with first place. So I did have a UVA, and I believe I was the only one who had UVA as first place, and I had my reasons. That being said, and I think I had a pretty significant enough gap between UVA and BTech for second. For me, between Virginia Tech and UVA, I thought they were pretty ahead of Cornell got third. My third was CMU, and I thought Tech and UVA were pretty above CMU as well. For me, the reason UVA was better at Blowout was because I felt, and I look back at my rubric at the rubric and my scoring and stuff as well. I thought they were more creative overall. I'm not gonna lie to you, and I'm happy to tell this to Aaron, their captain. But their set felt very reminiscent of a DCMPA VSB type set. And I think they were playing into that a little bit too much, right? Literally, the last DCMP set I remember, they ended a music set with a live, two totalies,
Yeah.
and I get it, just means you loved it. But at the same
Yeah.
time, your own academy did that quite recently. And I know a lot of those kids are on VSP and DCPA. So I would expect them to not recycle the same stuff and push it a little bit more, which I believe UVA did. Which is why I rewarded them in that sort of creativity sort of section. Also, looking back, I felt like VTech's formations were rather stagnant, even compared to a CMU. Their dancing was beautiful, but their formations felt really stagnant to me. I also felt like their dancer rotation, I didn't quite jive with, because they kept doing this thing where they would bring in other Geordies that were not their showcased Geordies into like a transition. They'll bring them to the center. And now we go back for the rest of the segment to a Geordie we've been seeing for the last 5 segments. You know what I mean? So those kind of things kind of, for me, brought UVA above Tech, because I think, and I looked at the scoring, I scored them pretty much identically when it came to dancing itself. Because I think dancing wise, these two teams were above the rest. But that I didn't have a problem with Tech winning, because majority of you guys agreed, and I can see your point. I can understand why. So I didn't have a problem at all.
And I think that UVA really had it in the bag because of one reason, or sorry, the biggest reason that they had it in the bag was their set told a story. It had purpose to their set. Their set had purpose. So what I mean by this is, they're like, for example, they start off with the share, the body, a gimmick. I'm not a fan of the gimmicks, but it had a reason to be in there, right? Yarandatrak, right? And the thing with their choreography was that watch their setback and take a look at the way they do, the way they finish their last move of each segment. That last move will lead into the next segment, and it would like, they would end their hands off here and then go straight to Fumnia, and then it would just really flow so easily, especially with that the rock the mall segment or whatever it was. I think that was the most impactful part of their set. But it really set the bar high, especially for a team that's going last. You just saw like what, 6 or 7, 8 of these teams, and now you're exhausted, and then you just got hit with this refreshing set. That's like really creative, and UVA really outdid themselves. That.
Yeah, I think that I didn't have this context, but I think they had only gone 16 for Blowout. They were going 12 this whole year, right? And I honestly think that had they gone 12, placings may have been a different conversation. I think that the 16 really did well for them. I don't know. I think like towards the end, I think the dancer discrepancy definitely became apparent to me, which is why I think it didn't have as much of an impact as VTech. I think VTech throughout, just the dancing quality was really, really good. The execution was really good. UVA definitely had its like, they had their moments. A lot of their dancers danced with a lot of maturity, which was really, really nice to see, especially, with collegiate teams and stuff. You have a lot of people that are just starting out, but I think that everyone on UVA just had a lot of like nice stage presence, nice nakara that was really nice to watch. So I think in general, the dancer discrepancy was like kind of what made the end part of their set fall a little bit flat, even though they started off with a bang. But I think that's kind of where the difference was between VTech and UVA.
I would echo the same. UVA was super pleasurable to watch. Slightly less put together than VT in terms of dancer maturity, as actually I just pointed out. I would say VTech just made sure they dotted their I's, crossed their T's, and I don't have too much to add.
I think one thing I just wanted to bring up was specifically the that backdrop thing that just me was alluding to earlier. So this was something that I just want to bring attention to, because right before we sat down to judge, the board just kind of let us know. It was like, hey, this backdrop in the back, this white cloth thing is not this like white cloth thing. It's like this $30,000 super expensive like diffraction thing that listener has. And so because of that, like the venue itself has a policy in place that like if any team like damages it or dents it or like touches it in a bad way, which is like all of them, that some like a significant amount of points need to be deducted. So we're just like, okay. So we asked them like, hey, just tell us like what is bad, what is not bad. Because to us, like touching the back doesn't really affect the performances. So at the end of the competition, we just asked them like, hey, who touched it, and then who like really hit it, and like how much points you want to take off. The board said, okay, you have to take off more than 1 or 2 points. So like, can you take off 3 points? Because like, again, personally, I think as we as judges all agreed, like we had the exact same point deductions for everybody. Just didn't really care, but we just went with what they said. So just to clarify, so for like the overall scores, so Virginia Tech, they like tapped it apparently. So we all took off 1 point. UVA, if you can even see in the video, it's like a really big like ripple across. So we had to take 3 off. Cornell -1. UNC apparently didn't touch it. CMU got a -3. GT and UMD didn't hit it, and then Spartan had a -1. So just to kind of give context to that, because I had GT second, and I remember Akshil was like, "Yo, so why the fuck you had GT second?" I was like, "I don't know why I had GT second. What are you talking?" I had to like literally double check my thing. I was like, "No fucking way that I have GT second." And then I looked at it, I was like, "Oh damn, you're right." But to defend myself, one, I do stand by, like, I really like GT. And I think everybody else, like, they had, most everybody had, like, GT 4th or 5th. So, and, like, third through 6 was all really, really, really tight for pretty much every single judge out here. But the thing is, my point differentials generally were tighter than everybody else's. I personally don't think, like, there was a huge discrepancy between 1st and 5th, or like 1st, 5th, and 6th. Like personally, like I didn't think that like VTech was just infinitely better than everybody else. So that being said, I mean it's a 10-point differential between 1st and 6th, but I like again 10 points is a lot for me. And so because of that, you know, when you take 3 for me, if you take 3 points off for me, that's a ton. So you know UVA I gave an 81, but -3. That's an 84. They're now at second. CMU, I gave a 75 at -3. That's like a 78, 78.5, 79. That like gets them into like that 4th place conversation. GT didn't have any points off, so yeah, they had it. That being said, I really like GT. I think they had like one of the better personally, like they had one of the better forms tonight. I know you disagree with me, but
I do.
I
do.
like for me, like when I've captained FCB and also just in my own personal dancing, form, like strict fundamentals were like really important to me. So having good posture, dancing low and wide, getting low on shawl, having your legs high, all those things are things that I particularly value. And when I saw GT dance, for the most part, I saw that. But and like in comparison to VT. There are other aspects to form in this category that is like the form section on the rubric, but you know VT. I think we can all very much say like VT danced tall, like pretty much the entire set. UVA similarly like danced tall. CMU like I really liked the way they had their form, but I mean like extensions weren't always as much as I wanted, things like that. And personally, like I think GT had one of the better forms, like better form of the night. And that's, if you look at my scores, that's kind of like where they tended to hit it. Like impact overall, wow impression, no. Like VTech killed that, UVA killed that, Cornell killed that, you know, on my rubric. But
before Pooja has to head out, I do want to jump back to 3rd place because that was the one placing that I think everybody had something different, and so do you guys want to just talk about that deliberation and why Cornell got 3rd versus all the other teams that were in contention?
Sure. Let me jump in real quick before I have to head out. So I had GT in 4th, and so Umar and I saw them at Nashville, and their set was much tidier. They implemented exactly the critiques that we gave them at Nashville. It just came down to other teams bringing an overall package. Like I think someone brought it up in the deliberations. They dance kulla Bhangra. And it's really nice to watch. But again, it comes down to that overall impact section in the rubric that we were talking about. So for Cornell, I would say they weren't the cleanest team of the night, but they had novel and captivating ideas, and it was very engaging. They stood out in terms of bringing different ideas and keeping the attention of the audience and the judges time and time again in each of their segments. I think that's what set them apart and brought them up to third place. But again, there's a lot of discrepancy, a lot of discussion there. So,
Well, let me just quickly go to who I had as third place. And I had CMU at third place. I was very impressed with the overall product that they brought on stage. And frankly speaking, I think they really gave Virginia Tech a run for their money, especially after going second to a team that eventually ended up winning and was a home crowd team. I really felt like CMU held their own, and I felt validated about that after UNC and GT had performed because the impact from CMU to me felt great. I loved the changes, and I told them I loved the changes that they made since ECS. And this is what I told them in the deliberation, or not the meeting with the teams. I told them that while their set got less corny from ECS, it got cornier in other ways. It's a lot of like cheesy kind of ideas between Geordies, or one after another, maybe cheesy footwork. A lot of that, where I think maybe a few in a set can be fine, but when I start just kind of like noticing one after another, I personally start to tend to take the set a little less seriously. Because for me, like, that power starts to really kind of dissipate. That's just my flavor of Bhangra. That being said, I was trying to make a case for them to get third because of other reasons. Because I thought, I personally thought they had one of the better drummers of the night. I thought for the most part they gave us a pretty flawless performance. No one fell, no one missed a beat. I didn't notice any hesitations. Whereas, going on GT, right? GT, I agree, had a lot of good form for a lot of the set, but you look at their ending impression, they were trying to go so low to the point where everyone's form kind of looked off, and one of the red girls in the front and center ended up falling. And that was the last impression we were left with. Mode were great. Pace was great. Formations were great. Their share, not so great for me because it felt a little draggy. But that being said, even on the share, I loved what they were doing dancing wise. Behind, I thought that was better than what Virginia Tech did, which was not much. Just brought a couple of props out. So yeah, they compromised getting low and wide, over being able to actually execute that, to a capable level. So that's why I couldn't make a case for GT. Cornell, they had a lot of great moments, I must say, which is why, I was happy with them getting third, even though I had them sixth, because I think they had a lot of great moments. They clearly wowed a lot of you guys, and I can see why. But there was a certain level of finesse and polish that I believe UVA Tech and CMU brought that was missing from Cornell. Even though their ideas were great, that polish was missing for me. And if this is the National Collegiate Championship, then we expect that level of polish. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of those other teams didn't quite have that, even though they had great ideas and a lot of good dancing,
In terms of Cornell, I think that I haven't been like so excited to see like a set like that in, I don't know, in a really long time. I just I didn't really know what direction they were going in at any given point in the set, which was super exciting for me to watch. I think that at their judges meeting, and this is my thought immediately after they went, but at the judges meeting too, I asked them, I was like, do you guys happen to watch a lot of UK sets? And they were like, shit, yeah, we do. And I think that, as it went on, I started like noticing the influence more and more. And I mean, if you're a collegiate team, it is smart to watch TBS. Like TBS is blowout on steroids, right? So you want to watch the best of the best to get ideas. And I think especially in their Somalia segment, like a lot of UK teams have an ability to have like 17 things happening at once, and then it looks like cohesive, like really crazy, and it's really fun to watch. And I think they had like Cornell had all these cool mechanisms in their Somalia segment as well, and that was like probably one of my favorite parts of their set. Um, but even though like I could tell it was kind of inspired, I still appreciated the effort that they put into it, and it still felt pretty authentic in my opinion. Like the audience went crazy, like we were really excited watching it too. But I think the execution is just really where they lost out. But I mean, if they had kind of like I didn't have the context of like seeing a lot of these teams in previous competitions. I know you guys had judged them previously, but I'm like interested to go back and watch where they were at the beginning of the year and like how their set evolved into what it was.
Yeah, so for me in third place, I think everybody had some combination of like Cornell, UVA, UNC, CMU, like in some way, shape, or form, relatively close to each other. For me, I had Cornell at third, UVA fourth, UNC fifth, and CMU sixth. That being said, it was like 5 points between all of those, so like it wasn't really that much. And so I was more than happy to be like convinced one way or the other just because it was so tight. And for me, I think like Akshay, you said this, like CMU, and Avi, you also said this, like CMU's like execution, like really, really good, like very, very clean, very, very strong. That being said, like and I told them this during the judges meeting too, like your set kind of went this, like had a very similar like pattern over and over again. It would be like stuff, like general stuff at the beginning of the segment that was very forgettable, maybe a cascade mechanism or two, followed by some like cheeky little like Jody interaction or some like for the Shike segment, they did like the SpongeBob like footwork, and then they did just hit like normal subjaw. And like that was just kind of like the pattern over and over again, like whatever, some cascade, some cascade mechanism, some weird like some cheeky Jody interaction or footwork, and then drop. And at first, like I said, like if you like read my notes, like it's like cool at the beginning, and I was like, okay, I'm bored. Like, and I told them that I kind of said like, hey, like look at Cornell. So or SGPD, Cornell's performance, I compared them to. I was like you like watch your performance and compare it to yours. Cornell had a very good variety of drops and moments throughout their set. They had like some cool, interesting thing at the beginning or in the middle of most of their segments. Their drops hit hard, and like execution wise, I mean, yes, they were not clean. Like I don't think anybody's arguing for that, but their execution and the way they attacked their drops was really helped the impact of all their drops. They had some formational things, like you said, like yes, it was very reminiscent of UK stuff, but also they were the only team of the night to even try to like pull off UK style like mechanisms and formations. So that stuck out and like was more memorable of the night. They just had a lot of different concepts, a lot of different mechanisms, a lot of different formations, a lot of different types of drops. And because it wasn't like they relied on the drop itself and the choreography of the drop itself, they also relied, like I said, just the energy that they brought to the drop, the formation that they brought to the drop. There was a different ways that they created impact. That's what made their set really good. UNC, like I personally, like one of the questions that the pod got on Discord was like, do you think UNC got comfortable because they won at first so much? I personally disagree. Like they brought their set, they made their changes, they did their things, but end of the day is like I judged them in Nashville. And the reason they won Nashville was because they were the cleanest team of the night, and they also had cool formations. At this competition, there was another team at this competition, Cornell, who had cooler formations than them. So that like gap is gone. And there were other teams at that night that either danced cleaner than them or were just as clean as them. And so that like advantage is gone. And so now like your relative scores, like your two biggest, like you were like 2 points ahead in like than every other team at the competition is now like close to like / you're not even the highest point earner in those categories, you're not going to win. Like, just straight fact, you're not going to win. So I don't think it was they got comfortable as it is the other teams like just straight beat them in terms of set design. And I think that's like where they won for UVA. And then UVA, I think the only reason they're fourth for me is because they hit the bank. Like, if they didn't think it, they were in second. So yeah. And at that point, we'd have kind of already agreed UVA was at second place. So I was like, I wasn't even considering it. So that's kind of how third place was for me. And I think overall that conversation was like, Avi was like, fine, I'll give Cornell third, but only if UVA gets second. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm fine with that. Whatever.
We all have to make concessions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like
not everybody.
and then not everybody was like stoked.
I'm happy to chime in on my thoughts on UNC. Told this to them in the line at the after party. They were a little upset with me. I was like, hey, I need to thank you. Because I made a case for you guys the last time you got a first, prior to the Nashville one. But for me, outside of their set, and I'm actually gonna slightly disagree. Slightly. So at ECS, they told us that like 8 out of 12 or something of their dancers were first-time dancers on stage. So a very new team. Like, majority of the team is very new. And watching Blowout, I didn't feel this at ECS, but at Blowout, because the caliber of the teams was, I feel like, a lot higher, and even the teams that competed against UNC over the year brought so much more impact and energy, that the discrepancy of dancing between UNC and a Tech or a UVA, or even a GT, right, outside of the executional errors, it showed. That dancer discrepancy showed. And I didn't feel like and Lumer, you used this word earlier, attack, right? I didn't think UNC attacked this set the same way that they did. And, I was thinking about it, and this might be just like super meta thoughts, but ECS was a much more intimate room. It was smaller significantly. The stage was smaller and there was no audience. And at Blowout, it was significantly larger. And I mean, by 2-3 times more. And their set was just less memorable. And their dancing flaws showed a little bit more. They didn't dance bigger. They didn't, the formations didn't hit as much. So I don't know, maybe that's just my head in the clouds, but.
No, actually, I think you're onto something a little bit there, because I also noted, like, at the end, I was like, like, I had, I was like thinking about this while I was like doing final checks on my notes. I was like, like I had formational creativity at other competitions for UNC, like higher, but like this comp, I like just like I made what am I like? I mean, I'm assuming they didn't change that much. I didn't change my point like scores based off of this like internal machinations, but that's interesting. I mean, like, maybe it was because like Nashville was also a much smaller comp. There wasn't that many people there, but like I think they were telling us like, yeah, like 1,100, 1,200 like seats were sold. So, and like it was a much larger stage and like all that stuff. So I don't think that's like really that far off base.
Yeah. I mean, because right, you bring veteran dancers, you give them a big crowd, they become bigger. You bring newer dancers, you give them a bigger crowd, they tend to, right? Unless it's a fight or flight, and if you're new, you're inexperienced. If you're a veteran, you're thrive, you're feeding off of it, and so now you macro that out to a team versus team. And I think it plays a role. I definitely do.
I think that's pretty much the majority of the questions that we had set on that document that we went to, that we sent to you guys. The next thing are a bunch of questions we got via our Discord. So we're just gonna like jump right into that, and hopefully like nothing just overlaps. So I'll go like one by one. The first thing we got was Cornell versus GT, and that's literally all we got. So that is the extent of the quorum on Cornell versus GT.
I mean, I think we kind of like hate it. Like, dude, like I kid you not. Like, I kid you not. And I think I like, so the way the judges seating was set and divided up was so that it's hilarious because they said the reason they divided up is so that we wouldn't talk to each other, even though we were
Yeah.
fucking yelling at each other like the entire time.
I
So
will
like,
say, when
I
I
like
saw
whatever.
Cornell, I looked
Um,
over and I saw you were losing your shit. You were.
I went like I think for Blow they said like, hey, like give a quote or something to encourage teams, and I said like just like remind make me do a performance so like I forget that I'm judging and I'm out of my seat. That is like Cornell's the only team that did that for me. I was like screaming like I'm sorry for whoever was behind me, but I was screaming my like ass off the entire performance. I was like, fuck, this shit hit so hard, and I think the big thing for me was just like Cornell had like really cool, interesting drops that like nobody else that night did, and GT had really cool dancing that made it that hit that and like very good dancing and had some cool moments. But end of the night, like there's 10 points for open and close, and there's 10 points for impact. Like Cornell like ate in those sections.
I think what really helped Cornell was their mix. And, they have an in-house mixer. I just found this out the other day. It was the green guy who got COVID apparently, and he couldn't dance from mixer night. Having an in-house mixer was probably one of the best decisions they could have done, especially when they have such a good mixer like Wads. He made the mix so well that it had the auditorium roaring, especially with the first drop they had, right? When they did the kick out into the juggany, that, especially with the kick out and the choreography, and then everything was just gluing together because of how well it was put together. And Cornell really nailed it in the coffin for it to be a placing set.
I also feel like I was so engaged and realized that they were missing a 12th person until like near the end.
Right.
And I think that was like the big difference, I think, in the way that our side, like we were kind of separated in like the way that our side perceived the set versus like Avi and Jasmeet. Because I think both of them dropped a lot of points for like formation or like symmetry, not necessarily formations, just like symmetry and, flow and that like cohesion. Whereas like having that 12th person there just like did not have an impact on my overall impression of the set, So I think that really showed how much they just like, invested. They were like so committed to every drop. Every single person from 1 to 12 was like, we're going to hit this like at 150%. And it definitely worked out. With GT, even though they did have great dancing, I think just like at this level, like when you have those bigger mistakes, like for example, like the purple curler guy, like one of their stops locked and the recovery was like really bad, let's just say. And I think that when like really big mistakes happen like that, like it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth in the overall performance. And they had a big mistake like that at the beginning of their set. They had a big mistake like that at the end of their set. So like with that being my first and last impression of the set, I think like overall, like in the middle, all the other things that I really enjoyed, it was just like when I think about impact and like what is memorable from their set, like those moments shouldn't really stand out to me, but they did. So
All right. Yeah. The next question we have: why is there a disparity amongst the judges in Cornell's point?
I think I think the reason that there's some disparity is just because like the way some of us judge. Like I know like Avi, you and me were like kind of going back and forth on this, and one thing I specifically said was that like choreography design, like I think creativity and set design creativity, like choreography and formations. I specifically I thought because they were so far ahead in comparison, again, for me, they were so far ahead personally, like in terms of that, like I have them 2 or 3 points ahead in both of those sections. And like, that's going to give them a huge jump. And so at a certain point, there is a level, like judging is judging, and it's also very subjective, and you're trying to put numbers to a subjective dance. And so not everybody's going to feel exactly the same. And so as long as you're applying that valuation consistently amongst all your scores, it should end of the day not like it should be consistent. But I think the reason is because we all liked or didn't didn't have the impact on each other. I think at the end of the day, like whether or not it impacted you or whether or not you thought it was creative is really dependent on, your past experiences and things like that. And so I think Cornell's performance was a little polarizing because I thought it was really creative, but you could argue that it's very reductive from UK sense. You'd say that the impact, personally, I thought even though their polish, their level of dancing and execution wasn't that great, it didn't impact my impact score. But for, I think, Jasmeet and Avi, I think it impacted your impact score a lot. And like, it didn't hit the same way as it did for me. But I think that's kind of where it lies. Like, Cornell's performance specifically just was a more polar.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess I should speak since Cornell's slightly on the lower end. It was sloppy. It was sloppy, and if we want to pinpoint areas of creativity, I get for me, for example, let's pick on their Kunde segment. I told them for me, their Kunde segment felt a lot like everything but a Kunda Bhangra segment. It felt like they took what Nachdi Folk Lovers did at BBC with their Kunde segment, and they made an entire segment of those mechanisms, those choreography. And I didn't quite see as much Bhangra with a Kunda, right? Because I'm all about the cool ideas with Kunde Yuzum, right? But you got to give me some Bhangra at the same time. I didn't feel that. So creatively, for me, I would adopt them lower. Hello, Kobe. I didn't like the first slowdown with Kunde. I didn't like the Jumer sample, like the song, the song and sample. It felt like there was a disconnect, but I didn't dock them for that. And overall, stylistically, they all seemed to dance very differently to me. In that moment, it didn't feel like they had standardized a lot of the fundamental moves. And so the dancing felt off. That's where I had GT actually ahead of Cornell. Because to me, at least, their dancing still felt standard. There were definitely some cool concepts, right? I loved their the long Tavitania segment. It was cool. It was a Bhangra segment. I liked it. A lot of the ideas didn't really hit, right? So, I mean, I know Akshaya didn't notice the dancer missing. I did immediately. Once they got into subs, because, you know, just for me, I'm looking for symmetry along with everything else and seeing how those pieces move. And it was very, you know, there for me. But that said, I didn't dock them on formation. I still gave them points besides that on formation. That's kind of like, and you know, the more you go towards the end of the seg, you know, the more form disparities start to show. If they were doing this thing, and I know where you agreed with me, with anytime a guy would come in the front, I know the pink Jordy did this a lot. I believe the blue Jordy did this a lot, where it was just very OD Nakra. And you know, I think right, like I think
Oh my god!
I would like to make a PSA
phrasing.
really quickly on Nakra. A PSA from my side to yours. A lot of us, especially young collegiate dancers, have this misnomer of Nakra being just like a cut paste smile, or just like the most like bobblehead you can be. And I love telling my students that Nakra is not just a face you make, but it's a feeling you feel. And Cornell was doing the bobblehead, and it wasn't a feeling they were feeling. So yeah, just remember that, right? And it's okay if you don't know Punjabi, or you don't have that like just growing up understanding of what Nakra kind of like means. But even in Punjabi, it means different contextually, it means different things. But for me, Nakra and Bhangra is a feeling and not just a face. So when Cornell kind of did that, where it was just like, let's go, I'm in the center, and now I'm going to move out of the center. It's just too much, you know? Now you're drawing attention away from your team and your dancing.
I thought it was just me.
So okay, yeah, that was my little rant, but yeah, happy for Cornell.
And then
sure.
last but not least,
yeah.
how did this blowout compare to previous year's blowouts? It's been 2 years since blowout, I believe, happened. So how did it feel?
I think generally, and I think this has been like a running theme if you listen to like any of the previous podcasts with the judging panel podcasts, execution across the board for pretty much every single team all year has been down. And I think that's like the little, I think Shirag in the Alamo podcast said it's the like little, it's a like circuit wide reset where like everybody's like hasn't really been dancing for 2 years. And so form across the board has gone down. That being said, I think ideas are still kind of fire. And personally, like, it is very easy to like get your form like up to snuff within a year. Like give these teams a year, 2 at the most, and it'll be fine. It'll be more than fine. Ideas when ideas start getting stale, that's when you get that whole fucking vibe. Like bring fire back to Circuit BTF post from a few years ago. Like that's when like shit gets boring, and that's when I get concerned. So performance wise, a little best year. I kind of expected that, having judged Nashville like 2 weeks prior. Rubric wise, I think it's like, I feel like we said this earlier, like it's more or less the same rubric, just organized differently.
I think for most teams, this was kind of like the grand finale, Super Bowl championship type performance before, some of them even graduate and never dance collegiate again, or just straight up become captains of their next teams. The standards are really high because they've had so much time to perfect their set. I think most of these sets were created in the summer of last year. So they've had, all of the fall semester and especially a lot of the spring semester to actually go and attend these competitions and take a look at the rubric. It was a really close game, especially with teams being within 1 to 2 points of each other. And for me, 0.3 and 0.5 points of each other. I think it was really hard, and it could have went either way. But I'm glad the way it turned out. Especially with Blowout from previous years. I can't say because I've never really looked at the judging side of it, but as an audience member, seeing the crowd fill was such a heartwarming thing. And ultimately, I don't think I've ever seen such a big audience turnout in any competition since COVID.
Yeah, I think from like a dancer perspective, we went to Blowout for so many years. 3 out of the 4 years that I was in undergrad, we went. And I don't know, I think that like Blowout 2016, like everyone knows, still talks about it. Like CMU was insane that year. And I think that so many teams were just like unmatched in their level of like set design and stuff. Were there other teams that had great like execution, great dancing, like really strong dancers, 1 to 12, 1 to 16 for sure. But I think that like now looking at like the last comp actually that I went to was like Blowout 2019. And I think now coming back and just seeing all the ideas and like all the teams that are really committing to that level is so crazy. Like, I don't think that anyone is just really relying on just like, having good dancing and like calling it a day. I think that a lot of teams just have really grown from that, and they're taking risks, which is really nice to see. So I think it's always like kind of a toss up, right? Because with collegiate teams, you have a turnover for like year after year, people are going to graduate. So it'll just be really interesting. And I think that because it's maybe harder to have those experienced dancers who have good form, who can be trained for a long time, like maybe this is what collegiate teams are realizing is the hack, right? We're going to just commit to our creativity or like set design and like go that route and just, do whatever we can, because like it's really hard to have, a full stacked roster of dancers year after year.
Yeah, I can speak next. How did this blowout compare to the others? So I told this to the judges earlier at the comp, but I've attended blowout since I was 16 years old. I'm 29 now. So I've seen the VCU era of dominance of blowout, and maybe it's nostalgia, but maybe I was too young to know any better, but I still hold those days when VCU was dominating, when UVA, Deshaun was, contending, Drexel was contending. Those sets, I remember just looking as a kid and being wowed by, and maybe that's nostalgia. That being said, I was very proud of what the teams brought. You've got COVID. Bhangra hasn't happened in so long. So many academies and dance schools closed down. So for these kids to still find this outlet and to continue thinking, so many of those kids were VSB kids like that I remember when they were like 13, 14, and now they're captains of tech UVAs of the world. And they've really gotten into their own as set creators and and designers and leaders, and I'm very proud of all of them. And I was very, like I said earlier on the cast, as a whole, I enjoyed watching Bhangra Blowout more so than the last couple of competitions that have been happening on the circuit. And I think that might be partly because of the rubric. That might be partly because of teams catering to our judging styles. But I enjoyed it. And I'm very happy to see where the circuit goes. Yeah.